Would it surprise you to know that Henry Ford was working on an electric car all the way back in 1914? How fast did it take Ford to build a plane during the Second World War? And how did Ford manage to bring out an affordable V8 car? We'll answer these questions and more as we look at how Ford changed the world. Let's get moving. 1914 is a busy year for Henry Ford. His assembly line is rolling and his company is making hundreds of thousands of cars a year. He buys his wife Clara an electric car. It's a 1914 Detroit Electric, which she prefers to the Model T. It runs 80 miles on a single charge and reaches a top speed of 20 miles an hour. Word spreads that Henry is looking at manufacturing an electric vehicle. The New York Times reports he's building experimental electric cars. Other rumors report that he's bought an electricity generating plant in Niagara Falls, my hometown, specifically for the production of the Edison Ford car. Henry confirms these rumors, saying that he and Thomas Edison, you remember him, the guy who invented the light bulb, have been working on an electric car that will be practical and affordable. The problem is building a lightweight battery that can operate for long distances without recharging. Edison tells Automobile Topics that the Edison Ford car is coming along. It will sell between $500 and $750. Edison believes eventually the electric car will be universally used everywhere. Well, it turns out he's right. It just takes a lot longer than he expected. In fact, at the turn of the century, there are more electric cars than gas cars on the road in the United States. 40% of the cars are powered by steam, 38% by electricity, and only 22% by gasoline. Electric vehicles are better than gas-powered cars in many ways. They don't vibrate or smell, and they don't make noise. They also don't need a hand crank to start the engine. But electric cars are much more expensive than gas cars. By 1912, Edison has built 3 cars. He drives one from Scotland to London. He achieves top speeds of 25 miles an hour with 2 15-volt batteries and a 30-volt electric motor. But his car is twice as expensive as a gasoline car. This is where Henry comes in. He made gas-powered cars affordable. Can he do the same with electric cars? We'll never know, because by 1914 the project falls apart. Some say it's because Henry insists on powering the car with Edison's nickel-iron batteries, which are not suitable. There are rumors that the oil cartels are involved. These rumors are fueled further when Edison's workshop in West Orange is destroyed by a fire. The only outcome from the Edison Ford project seems to be his electric starter and electric lighting systems, which are added to the Model T in 1919. Let's fast forward for a moment to 2020. This is a year Ford is planning to have 10 to 25% of their fleet electric. It takes over 100 years for Henry and Edison's vision of a mainstream electric vehicle to materialize. Now back to 1917. America enters World War I. Henry is a pacifist. He even went on a peace mission to Europe 2 years prior to protest the war. Now he is commandeered to assist with production of vehicles. Ford develops the 3-ton M1918 Ford tank. The contract is to produce 10,000 of these lighter, cheaper tanks. They initially built 15 and one is sent to France for testing. It is found to be inferior to the Renault FT, so the order is canceled. One wonders how disappointed Henry is with all this. He likes things to work, but he disapproves of the war. With Henry, you never know. After all, a year later, he tricks the shareholders into selling their shares in the Ford Motor Company. It is 1918. He makes his son Edsel president. Then he starts a new company called Henry Ford & Son. He makes a big show of taking himself and his top people to the new company. He offers to buy back the shareholders' shares in Ford & Company. The shareholders agree because they think their shares will decrease with Henry gone. Once they do, they realize they've been tricked. He never had any plans to start a new company. He just wants complete control over the Ford Motor Company. Even his son, who is now president, doesn't get to make decisions. Henry overturns those decisions he disagrees with. Now it's 1922. Henry gets revenge on Henry Leland for using his designs all those years ago. The war has not been kind to Leland, and Lincoln has gone bankrupt. Henry purchases Lincoln, and he has Leland and his son escorted out of the building. It's not just revenge. Ford needs a separate luxury division. Edsel is keen to develop cars more exciting than the Model T and pushes his father into making cars that aren't just practical. Edsel is responsible for Lincoln Zephyr and Lincoln Continental. He introduces important features such as hydraulic brakes. But by 1927, sales are dwindling. Other car manufacturers are eating into the Model T sales, especially Chevy, who's going after the Model T market. The Chevy-Ford rivalry begins. Chevy, now part of General Motors, overtakes Ford in sales. Henry realizes that Edsel is right. A new design is necessary. He shuts down the factory to tool up for the new model. It's 1927 and Ford releases the Model A. It's styled by Edsel and is beautiful and fashionable. It's the first car with safety glass in the windshield. Ford retakes the lead. 2 years later, Chevy introduces a 6-cylinder model. They promote the 6-cylinder model for the same price you'd pay for a 4. It's priced at $555 to $675. The Model A Ford costs from $385 to $550. The large and more powerful Chevy car is preferred by customers. Henry thinks it's all over for 4-cylinder cars. He closes 25 of his 36 plants and lays off 75,000 men. But he has a trick up his sleeve. He's been experimenting with 8 cylinders. He tries an X8 configuration, but without success. It's too heavy and fails repeatedly. Now he's secretly working on something else. 1 year later, he launches the first low-priced car with a V8 engine. Once again, he brings innovation to the ordinary people. The breakthrough occurs because he develops a single block mold engine. Up until now, V8 engines have been made with multiple parts. The V8 flathead makes it affordable. It isn't just ordinary people who can go faster. The car is also a favorite amongst American gangsters. In 1934, Ford receives a letter from, or supposedly from, Clyde Barrow endorsing the Ford V8. Clyde Barrow of the notorious Bonnie and Clyde gang. The next few years, Ford is battling not only the competition, but also the unions. Henry doesn't believe in unions. Edsel attempts to reason with them. Eventually, his wife, Clara, threatens to leave him if he doesn't sign with the unions. He signs and gives workers better terms than both GM and Chrysler. Now it's 1941. It seems that America will enter World War II. The government asks Ford to produce parts for the B-24 Liberator military aircraft. Ford goes back to the government with a counter-proposal. They will build complete airplanes. In March, construction starts on the Willow Run plant in Michigan. By September, they begin partial production. Next to the plant, they construct an airport with 6 runways and 3 aircraft hangars. The plant is formally dedicated on October 22, 1941. 45 days later, Pearl Harbor is bombed. America enters the war. Edsel sets a goal of producing 1 plane every hour. They achieve that goal. Edsel doesn't live to see the end of the war. He dies from stomach cancer in 1943 at just 49 years old. His son, Henry Ford II, is serving in the Navy and cannot take over the presidency of the Ford Motor Company. So Henry reassumes the presidency. But he's aging, inconsistent, and suspicious, and no longer fit for the task. The company begins to decline. President Franklin Roosevelt considers a government takeover to protect the wartime production. But this doesn't happen. Henry Ford II leaves the Navy and joins the company management a few weeks later. But his grandfather won't give him control. Eventually, Henry's wife, Clara, puts pressure on him to let go. Sounds like my wife. And Edsel's widow threatens to sell her shares unless her son is given control. Finally, 2 years and 19 days after the war ends, Henry Ford steps down. Henry II will have the task of turning the ailing company around. 12 months later, Henry Ford passes away. By this time, the company he founded has produced more than 31 million vehicles. His cars have impacted the lives of millions around the world. His innovations in the assembly line have impacted even more. In the next video, we'll look at the car model that is responsible for turning the company around, plus 2 of the most iconic cars of all time, the Thunderbird and the Mustang. We'll ask why car makers name their models after horses, and we'll see how improvements in the assembly